Willkommen bei AERA, der Gemeinschaft zur Förderung des modernen Realismus. Heute mit Graeme Stevenson. Wir sind eine Gruppe internationaler Künstler, die traditionelle Maltechniken anwendet, um realistische, gegenwartsnahe Gemälde zu kreieren. In unserer Sendereihe wollen wir Malerinnen und Maler einzeln oder in Gruppen vorstellen und ihnen Gelegenheit geben, ihre Ideen und Arbeitsweisen zu erläutern. Da die Mehrzahl der Mitglieder ihre Präsentation in englischer Sprache vortragen, werden wir mit Untertiteln die jeweiligen Aussagen vermitteln.
G'day viewers, my name's Graeme Stevenson and I'd like to invite you to come on a journey of creativity and learning and adventure through the series Colour in Your Life. There's an artist in every family throughout the world, and lots of times there's an artist deep down inside all of us as well. So grab your kids, your brothers, your sisters, your aunties, uncles and mums and dads and come and see how some of the best artists in Australia do what they do.
Graeme Stevenson wird sich gleich selbst vorstellen und uns zeigen, wie ein Aquarell entsteht.
Well, good day viewers and welcome back to Colour in Your Life. You're actually in my studio today and I'm going to take you through some techniques again. And we're going to be actually doing some watercolours today. And the reason that we're doing watercolours is that a couple of weeks ago we flew to Melbourne and actually filmed a gentleman called Joseph Zbugvich, who is the #1 watercolour artist in the world. He's coming on next Sunday, so I thought just to build up to that, we'd actually do some watercolours and show you some techniques before the master comes on. And he is really the master when it comes to these things. But also, to add a little bit of a flavour, we've actually got one of our staff members and one of our team, Mealy, and Mealy's actually going to be asking me some questions in conjunction to hopefully what you guys would like to hear out there in the audience. So so we're going to make a start and go from there. What I'm going to do first off is obviously mix the colours. I'm actually using Schminky watercolours today. They've got a real solid consistency in the pigment within the paints. It's the Schminky 120 year anniversary, so they were making these things 120 years ago, which is pretty cool. And I've actually just wet these guys down a little bit. Just take the spray bottle, like so, just to make sure that the colour still flows. So I'm going to take a little bit of the magenta here. I'm going to pull that into there. A little bit more of the white, just to mix the colour, base colour that I need. I'll actually put these up on this edge here, so I'm not particularly using those colours right now. And I've got enough room to manoeuvre now and start the process of wetting the actual surface area itself. I've got my brushes here ready to go. I've got 4 of them. I've got a wound piece of tissue as well, in case I want to go in and actually draw out some of the colour to bring up a lighter area, an area like that. So I'll go over and I'll come in and I'll actually push that and I'll bring that out again and I'll suck up that pigment. So from here, we start to apply the water.
So you wouldn't spray that yet, you just...
No. All I'm going to do is, because I don't want the water to bleed into some areas. We start colour, top area, and there. You can see those little areas that I've sort of left out. We work quickly now, it's just starting to go off a bit. Okay.
So it'd actually be harder to paint in summer when it was hotter? You're lucky we've got a rainy day today.
Yes. And I want that effect just to continue to flow. As you can see, I'm leaving certain areas out. I'm letting the letting the paint do a lot of the work for me.
It's a very specialised technique. How long have you been doing watercolours?
I started my career with watercolours and painted a lot of wildlife with it for a number of years. I'm just going to throw a few of those darker colours in there. There's still enough moisture in there for me to manoeuvre it. A bit more water. Just a tad. We don't want too much because it'll end up just turning it into just a big mess, so we want to try and keep some separation with this colour, pigment. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go in with this guy here, bring out some of these rocks, bring that one in there, top of the rock there, top of the rock there. You can bring this out if you want by wetting the brush and then using the tissues just to do that. Okay, from here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do these certain areas. As I said, it's really part and parcel of, not like a normal watercolour, you just sort of drag it down. And as you can see, I'm wetting these areas. And as you can also hear, it's raining on my studio. So, you might have to put up with the rain, guys. And then I'm just tacking in some of these little areas.
And so what's actually the weight of the paper?
The paper is 300 GSM, which is a nice solid thickness, so that when you're actually doing washes like this, as you can see, it's actually the buckle's gone out of it since we've let that dry out. Mm-hmm. But it is important that you have a paper that will hold its shape. Now from there, I'm wanting to get a little bit of this purpley doodly daddly colour in there, down the bottom there, and it's all about the water, it's all about the timing. It's not as if you're sort of trying to get this massive detail. All you're doing is just creating an impression. Now you start to see those other colours really start to juxtapose each other. Because it's actually quite dry in here, there you go, see the point now? Mm-hmm. And that way I can actually start to work into these areas in here. I mean, quite quickly. I'm not saying that everybody's simply going to be able to pick up one of these brushes and do it like I'm doing it. It does take time.
Practice.
Practice makes perfect. So I'm painting wet onto dry, not wet onto wet at the moment. Referring back to what I've got up here. So over the years, I mean, if you're looking at this particular technique here, it's actually sort of quite loose. But over the years I've worked on watercolours, or when I first started my career, and this technique in comparison to those is really quite loose and quite quick, whereas a lot of the paintings I did when I was younger would take me hundreds and hundreds of hours to paint because I was actually working in a photographic style.
And this is the book that you painted when you were younger?
Yeah, well that's one of them. I have a couple of books out, but that one was the study of the parrots of the world, the Sidicane.
How long did it take you to do this? There's so many paintings of you.
And that took me 2.5 years to paint, 9,000 hours.
And they're all watercolour?
They're all watercolour paintings with gouache on top, but because it was an anatomical study, they had to be reasonably accurate. I did use gouache in those particular pictures. I did taxidermy when I was a kid, so I had quite a good understanding of the anatomy of these animals. Mm-hmm. Now what I'm doing with this up here is I'm just really dry brushing it. It's really just using the surface of the paper to get a lot of the effects that I want. Scumbling it in, fingers, as long as you don't tear the paper too much. And see how it's quite dry there? See how the brush is actually picking up the surface of the paper? Mm-hmm. what I'm doing is I'm just taking the watercolour, and this is white within it, and I'm running it across. Can you see that?
Yep.
And then I'm going to run it across into these other areas to sort of pick up some highlights of where the lighter areas would be. And see how I'm actually really working it now?
Yeah.
So a little bit of moisture in there, it's actually picking that up. I can actually soften that off. So as you can see, I'm putting these dots in. This is the gouache.
So gouache is a more opaque medium, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's the best way to describe it. It's a very solid form of the watercolour.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm going to come down here with this dry area again, and just throw the paint in there. I've actually wet these other small areas, but this one here is a dry one, because I want this to ride over the top. And what I'm going to do is, once again with that gouache, and it's just really a matter of dibbling, daubling and dabbling. On the website, there's a ton of information in there, that the idea of, you know, creating colour in your life, and the comments that we're getting back from people because of what's going on with the series, which is just marvellous. Thank you everybody for watching. Is that everybody's wanting to pick up a paintbrush now. I mean, people that have just said, I haven't picked up a paintbrush in years and years and years, and this program is enabling them to be able to do that. I think is really, really quite cool. And it's helping people out, even to the extent that we've heard from people that are in correctional facilities across the country that have been incarcerated for whatever reason, and they've actually started painting as well because of the series, which is really
amazing
quite amazing stuff. It really is. So I'm glad that it's actually doing what it's doing to help people.
Well, I'm inspired. I'm going to go home and play with my watercolours.
Well, I hope so.
Yes.
What I'm going to do now is, because this is sort of dried off fairly well in this area here, I can actually put down another wash.
So you're just putting the colour on the brush, but then kind of washing most of it off.
Yeah, I mean, you really don't want too much there. You only want that suggestion. Yeah. We can sort of highlight that later on, but can you see how that's just sort of done what I needed it to do? If I'm squinting my eyes, I'm squinting my eyes on this, I'm squinting my eyes on that too. If you wanted to, you can scratch the board.
Oh, what does that do?
Well, as you can see, I'm actually creating, and then the colour seeps into it. Rock, which while is that still wet, I'll pull that up into there. A bit of purple. Because remember, the water is going in one direction. It's going across and down in this picture anyway.
So you've taken these photographs, you've set this up to...
Yeah, and I think that's... Even on the, say if you go to the website, there's a place for photographers in there as well, sculptors, you know, ceramics. It doesn't matter. It's not just about painters by any means, it's about everybody that's in the humanities and that has a creative right brain. But in answering your question is that it's great to be able to go out and capture your own material. It's just simply beauty everywhere. Part of the beauty of this and what's happening with people while they're coming into the show is that they are getting in touch with things that they may have forgotten about a long time ago. Alright guys, well, what I'm doing is I'm actually just cleaning out this area of my palette. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to mix a series of reds using my cool colours, my blues and my purples in that. Once again, water, and it is just a matter of, well, running it.
Wow.
Like so. Getting rid of the excess water. These are all sort of separate little areas that'll look like it'll just simply be one whole situation later on. Like so. There's a bit more water in here in the brush itself. Don't get too carried away. I want to try and leave the white dark line all the way down there like so. I'll run it along the side there like so. There it is.
So it just does its own natural shading.
You don't have to force it in anywhere at all. It'll just simply, as long as you just sort of place it in the right place in the first place. That's it.
Beautiful.
You can see the light coming through there. That'll settle down slowly. If I need to later on, I can come over the top of that again. The colours that we're using here today are still just as intense as a lot of the other work that I produce. The oils really do bring it up, but because of the subtlety of leaving a lot of the paper to do the work for you, you can get some quite dynamic effects with watercolours.
Can you tell me why there is a difference between oil paintings and watercolour paintings in pricing?
Sure, it's got to do with the archival factor of the watercolour and how long it lasts. These guys might last you 120 years in the factor that oil paintings will be around for the next 400 or 500 or 600 years. So of course everybody will be dead, but then in saying that, generally people like to pass these things along through their estates, and you know, hence the reason that that's the case with them.
Graeme, this series of paintings, what does it mean to you?
So, I mean, I love the mathematics about nature and science and the mathematics in the universe, and the Nautilus shell, which is made up of the golden mean and the Fibonacci sequence. If any of you want to know more about that, you can come to the site and ask me. And I also love the colour red. The reason that I paint in the way that I paint, particularly with some of the stories like The Truth, the big one that I did a couple of years ago, is that I think that if art doesn't make some type of social statement, then it's sort of just a pretty picture in the end. Now, in saying that, these ones probably are, because they're based on what we're trying to give across to the viewers, of course. But I think that there must be some social statement. I love history, archaeology, genetics, biology, and by studying those you can actually see that the world is probably not what we think it is a lot of the time. And we are born into this left brain world, and everybody just says put your crayons and your pencils down when you're 7 years of age, and that's it. And that's really not what life is about, and a lot of us have been disconnected from the world a great deal. I mean that sincerely, because of the fact that we have lost the capacity in many senses to awaken certain aspects about who we are as human beings. And part and parcel of me beginning this series and starting this series, putting it together, was to obviously for people to see what we do, educate themselves, go into the studios of artists, which is a real rare privilege for all of us to be able to do, but to be able to tap into another side of who we are as a species, and to be able to express yourself. I mean, it's all well and good having all the technology around you, but if you simply don't know how to tap into you and awaken who you are as a human being, you just simply lose the process of being alive in the first place. And that's why it's really important to me. And these are the legacies that we leave for our children. In many senses, it's what else? What else do we leave behind? I've sort of started to bring this together fairly well. Once again, as I said, it's a matter of, you know, dipping in and out, diving in and out, learning to understand, particularly just mastering the value of the content of the water and the pigment, which is going to give you those certain aspects that you want in your colour, and then, you know, as you can see now, washing the brush, getting the water out, being able to feel my way through the picture, like so, and then using the paper, the white of the paper, in the example of what we're doing to give you the lights in your picture as well. I'm going to finish this picture off, but we've taken you through some of the process of putting this together, and then you'll obviously, as we always do, you'll see this screened on to your TV station, wherever you are, the television. But some of the techniques I'm using, you know, particularly within this area here, would be very similar to making it bleed. I'll wet all of those areas in there, in between all of those little sections of the Nautilus shell. And then what I'll do is I'll turn it upside down and I'll drop colour in to where that wet area is, and I'll let it bleed out slowly. You can see at the top here where it actually sort of bleeds out and then leaves this nice white area. Well, I'll turn it upside down, and you're allowed to turn the board around any way you want. There are some great easels that you can get for watercolours that you can keep spinning them around. But what I'm going to do is I'll do that later on. You've seen the process of doing this. You've seen literally the basis of putting all of that together. It's not too hard. It's just a matter of taking your time and building it. It's like a story. Don't expect the results to come all at once because you put the paint on the paper. It's just the progress of building it to where you need it to go. All right, viewers, well, I'll leave it at that. And I want to talk a little bit more about the website before we go. The website is just fantastic. We've really created, I would think, and a lot of the comments that we get back from people, it's a lot like Facebook for artists. I'm not saying that it is Facebook, but it's a very similar concept. But there's a lot of people moving in and out of the system now. We have literally hundreds and hundreds of members signing on, talking to each other, exchanging ideas. We have blogs, there are information, lots and lots of advertisers are coming in. Some of the major companies that supply paint, the big art stores, the frame shops are all wanting to be parcel of what we're doing, because it's going to help us all to communicate under a central portal. We all get very scattered as right-brained people, and this was designed to bring us all together so that we can sell our work better, we can present ourselves better to the public and to people that are interested in art, and we can communicate with each other a lot better as well. But come in, remember the website is www.colorinyourlife.com.au. I'd also like to thank Mealy for coming in. It's been great. Meals is part of our teams these days, and she was one of the first people that came on board and realised that this was just a great place for her to be as well, and she's been a great and very valued member of our team and is going to help us obviously expand what we're doing. She has amazing skills herself, not just as an artist, but she has amazing skills in many, many different fields. Thank you. So we are really building a huge basis. We have a number of employees now, but it's a great place to be. But as I always say, remember, make sure you put some colour in your life. We'll see you next time. Bye.
An dieser Stelle möchten wir uns ganz herzlich bei Graeme Stevenson bedanken. Er hat uns dieses Filmmaterial freundlicherweise zur Verfügung gestellt. Wir haben mit ihm verabredet, auch zukünftig einige seiner Produktionen hier in diesem Programm zu präsentieren. Wir werden viele international bekannte Künstler zu sehen bekommen. Wir freuen uns auf diese Zusammenarbeit. Dies bringt uns zum Ende unseres heutigen Programms. In den kommenden Monaten werden wir weitere Folgen mit Malerinnen und Malern aus aller Welt präsentieren. Halten Sie deshalb Ausschau nach AERA, der Association Embracing Realist Art, und besuchen Sie unsere englische Internetseite realist-art.com.